Here we are again, part 2 of welding episodes. God knows how many parts. I thought I'd start off by showing you this website. I took this domain name on as the previous owner lost love with it. So it's alfaromeo75.co.uk, and I've got all these workshop manuals on here, including this one, which is the sheet metal diagram. So I use this quite a bit when figuring out what bits of metal need to stick to which bits and which bits are rotting away into dust. So in here you can see the various large sheet metal parts. So this connection sheet panel that just sticks these bits together up here, and then this bit here, which is just loves rotting, if I'm honest. Number 1, which I think is cowl top. But yeah, if you scroll through, you can see that this is the firewall between the cabin and the engine bay, and the various sections that make up the parts that I'm repairing currently, which are a nightmare because it's tons of different sheet metal stuck together. So, on to it. This is the first section I'm approaching in this particular video, which is the passenger side scuttle top, where the cowling meets the inner wing. As you can see, it's in a pretty bad state. I didn't think to take any pictures before cutting away the rusty metal, but you get the idea. Anything that's not there was no good saving. This bit is exactly how I found it, after I'd poked a few holes through it anyway. This is from the underside of the dash, so again a nice hidden area for me to weld and hide my terrible welding. So cut this first section out back to good metal, and then that soon grew. So obviously these seams here are just where they've been pressed and then spot welded together by robots. We're going to be doing seam welding here, so it's not so important to keep those pressed sections. So you can see it's a bit of a hack away here. I'm limited by my tools here. This was the first cut. It did clean up before I started putting panels in, I must admit, because that would have been a nightmare to cut shapes for. This is the engine bay side. You can see the bits of metal that are missing. They were too rotten to fix, so I'll just come back to good metal so that I can hopefully have some good metal that will last a while once I've done the repairs. This is a very awkward section because you've got that cowl top which drains the water down into a drain hole at the bottom there. Those holes that you just saw, they're actually the hinge holes that bolt to. So there's the drain hole, and this is me creating the first sheet metal section just to guide that water downhill and onto the wheel. This is it from just a different angle. I'm just trying to create relatively clean, strong seam welds. They're not particularly pretty, but you know, they're strong. They hold water, as I tested, and this is the underside of that first section, and the hole up into the dash. So this is just weld through primer. I try to use it between welding sessions just so I've got some form of protection in case it decides to bucket down with rain. This is just the first section tack welded in before I put any decent bead down, and this is just a section over the wheel arch. So this is what I'd recommend doing if you're welding any metal on the 75, because it's very thin. It's like 0.8 mil. So I just use either stitch welding or like burst welding, and it eventually makes up a nice continuous stream like this. Although it's not easy, or it's certainly not easy for me anyway. I've got my welder dialed all the way down just to try and keep this from blowing through, and more important than anything is just to clean up the metal best you can. But you know, the results are okay, and then once they're flat back they look even better. But it's nice strong welds, like I said. So this is at the top, and that's a button section to it. This is to run the water down the valley and out through the drain. So by the time I'm done welding all this up and flattening it back, I prime and seam seal it for some protection, and any bits of corrosion I'll add the FE123 converter before sealing. So this is just one section that I cut out. There was many sections, but I wasn't very good at documenting them all. Using cardboard again as a template, and then using the metal scissors to cut out the tin. So that's one section at the top there. That had all corroded away, needed replacing. I'm trying to make this nice and strong, probably stronger than it was originally, if I'm honest, with the steel that I'm using. It's certainly more resilient than the steel that I'm taking out. And yeah, this is all welded up at the side here. I was just trying to make sure that it was a continuous seam more than anything. This all gets hidden by the dash, and I obviously wanted to make sure it wasn't going to collide with the dash as well, so it needs to be relatively flat. Again, this is before any kind of flatting. This is just with the base welds there. This is with the next section stitched in. Again, this isn't clean, and by no means is this the proper way of doing things. If it was a lot more access, I would be butt welding everything and trying to make it look invisible, but because of where it is and the access that I've got without having to take the windscreen off and cut out the sections around the windscreen, this is what I'm working with. So that's all tacked in. Added a few more tacks to make sure there's strength between the different folds there, and I'm using the existing spot weld overlap at the bottom there to bring it in line, and then just one small section there. That was all welded up. So that's the passenger side done, ready for the dash to go over just as soon as I put some sealing on it. So this is the outside of it here, and the various repair panels for the end of the cowl or scuttle, and then that's with all the seam sealer and primer over it, and a bit of flatting and a few extra little bits of weld where the seams weren't continuous yet. There it is. I tried to use masking tape to keep the seam sealer tidy. It didn't work so well, if I'm honest. It still looks like a mess. I definitely need to learn how to use seam sealer properly rather than just making a mess everywhere, but I'd rather the water wasn't getting in, if I'm honest. This doesn't need to look particularly pretty. It is completely covered by the dash, and to be fair, the factory seam sealer isn't pretty either. This was another section I just patched over. This is in the bottom of the wheel arch, or the top of the wheel arch, hidden out of sight. So this is the second side. This is driver's side, and the A-pillar was not looking pretty. It resembled a colander, and there's lots of compound curves that I needed to bend in, holes to be drilled through, and various other things to be mindful of. This was not easy. This took me probably 2 days of work to do this welding on this pillar alone, and it's not finished yet, as you'll see. So you can see that's that first section that's just tacked in place. I've cut hole for the second section, and then from there obviously got a template, but anything that was in that hole wasn't particularly good metal, so I thought I'd replace that. I'm doing it bit by bit so that I don't lose the shape of the pillar, because I don't want to interact with the outer wing or the sill or the door. So I'm just trying to keep it as close to factory as I can. So that's that tacked in there, and then a third section there just to complete this section. So that was a faff, but it did give me access to the inside, and it wasn't as bad as I thought. So down the bottom here in the sill, there was a lot of rust, just loose rust from above that had fallen down to the sill. The sill itself still had its primer seal on it, so I was thankful of that. So I hoovered all that out, and obviously started to make up new sections to just fill in between the bottom of the A-pillar and the top of the sill, because that was a new sill that was replaced about 5 years ago, so maybe 7 years ago. But yeah, continuing on here, welding in, making new panels. Again, like I said, lots of compound curves. I found some techniques in the vise. This is a hefty vise that my dad found for me. I forget where now, but he gave me that a while back, and it's proven a great tool. So here's the section in, welded in. There's some more to do above there, which still needs to be cut out. But this section came out looking pretty good, and with the door refitted, it all aligns nicely, ready for the wiring to go through there for the indicator and for the door. So primed it all up, and some seam sealed. Actually no, I don't think this has been seam sealed yet. This is a primed until I finish the top part here. So as you can see, not looking too pretty, but this is probably the next video now, just because of the sheer time that's taken me to do this. I'm very hopeful to be outside of welding soon. See you on the next one.